Hello, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. Today is, what is today? Friday, June 18th, 2025. I want to thank you all for joining us after our quick, am I wrong, Brant? Am I wrong?
July.
I said June?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking. I want more summer. Friday, July 18th, 2025. We've had a break, which Francis will explain, and now we're back to running office hours. So thank you for allowing us the break. We've been a little overworked.
Yes, especially Curt.
Yeah.
As you will explain.
It's Friday, and it was Monday like 5 minutes ago.
So we took this month and essentially revamped our offerings to Substack subscribers. So this meeting, any paid Substack subscribers for a measly $10 a month can get to join this meeting and in this specific Google Meet meeting live and ask their questions to Curt, Martin, and myself in a live interaction setting. Originally, when I structured the office hour, this is the eventual format we want to get to anyway. So think of the asking question in the doc as a trial, and now the members can now ask us questions live. And so typically what I'll do is, if you receive the email from Analyze staff, it should include the link to this meeting for the Substack subscribers. And I'll just let you in the meeting, and then we'll answer those questions first before we get to the questions in the submitted through the form. Okay, so this is completely optional. You don't have to join if you don't want to, and in fact, you don't even, if you feel shy, you don't have to speak through the speak up or anything. You can just post your questions in the chat link as well in the Google Meet. So with that said, we don't have anyone.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Was your objective to make it more interactive?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. Francis is very smart. I just do what he tells me.
You're giving too much credit.
No, not really.
All right. So with that said, we don't have anyone join the meeting today, at least not yet. So we'll just proceed directly to the office hour backlog. And I'll start question number 1. This was probably from, well, at least from a few months ago since we've taken a month's break. All right, question number 1. Seems like not much action has been coming from NLI lately since the last conference. Can you discuss what's currently going on and any future event publications for the rest of the calendar year?
Are you answering this or am I?
I'll start, and Curt, I'll let you take over because a large part of it has to do with the work you're doing. So future events is currently TBD, and the reason it's TBD is we want this next event to be one that corresponds with the publishing of the book.
Yes.
And yeah, so Curt, can you give our audience an update on the books, emphasize on the multiple?
So think of it strategically from our standpoint. We came out with a series of events and the content for the events that culminated in the concern that we were going to have a revolution. What happened was that Trump got elected, and which I didn't expect. I was kind of impressed. I mean, a long time ago, I didn't expect it. But once I saw who they were running, then it became an open question, right? Because that was kind of silly. But in any event, what happened is Trump's election took a lot of wind out of the sails of revolution, at least for the time being. And so what we wanted to look at was we wanted to give him his 100 days, which is about happened, right? Is that about right? Are we getting close to that? We're getting close to it. We wanted to give him his 100 day. Oh no, we're past the 100 days. So I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong 180 days in a year instead of 360. So um, so what we want to do is say we want to see the path that this is taking before we have the next conference, and then that intersected with, well, let's use the next conference to launch the book, the first book we release. Is that the right way to frame it, Francis? And so what's happening over the past few months and what's still going forward is Brad and I are trying to crank the book out for volume one. It's not, to realize we're not putting out just one book, but volume one as fast as we can. Oh, I don't know what my problem is. I had plenty of sleep. And we are in the mid 20s, I think, of 44 chapters, I think. Right? Now that's you can't really go like that's a little more than halfway. It's more that we drafted the book, right? And some chapters, like the ones on logic, they take us like 3 weeks. And some chapters, like the ones on history, which are already mostly drafted, we get through them in a weekend. So I was a couple weekends ago, we were able to get through 3 chapters. And that's because we're not in first draft position. We're in second draft position, which is the book's drafted, but we want the argument to be solid all the way across. And then the final draft is when you go through and you make sure that it sounds consistent and the references between chapters are correct and everything like that. So that's a crossing the I's and dotting the T's. Is it the other way? Crossing the T's and dotting the I's thing. So we're about that far. It's a very meaty volume. It's almost 1,000 pages already. It won't get too long, but I mean, when we're talking about things that are on the scale that other authors have done, we're in the same ballpark. So I'm hoping to get this out for a fall conference. That's what I would like to do. But you can't, because Brad and I only have so much time to work together on it. And I can only work without Brad so much time because of the way we collaborate. I just can't accelerate it any faster than it's going. Meanwhile, we have other things that we're in the process of working on, and that consumes the rest of the time. So I'm not sure I could mentally do more than we are doing anyway. But as Francis said, whenever we can have a launch event, we will combine that with our understanding of the trajectory of the Trump administration's radical revision of the world order, and in some ways his attempt to make a radical revision of what we would call the deep state.
That's actually a great question. That's actually a great leading into question number 2. But before we move there, I just want to say, if it's already 1,000 pages, you should probably break it down to like volume 1 and 2 further. Nobody reads 1,000-page books. 500 pages, maybe.
Well, so here's a great question. This is an important question. Well, first of all, people do read them, but it's a smaller number. But it might be the people. It might be the right people to read them. So, but anyway, I mean, Tragedy and Hope was a bestseller, and that's probably the most recent one. That was back in the 60s or 70s. That's probably the most recent one that's at the same scale in scope. Oh shit! What did you just say?
I was going to say that this is what you just said is also perfect leading into question 2. I might as well just ask here, right? So question 2 is Martin. It's a question for Martin and Curt. It's been approximately 100 days of Trump being in office. Martin, can you provide your assessment of his performance thus far from the European perspective? And Curt, please provide your perspective as well. By the way, this was asked back in April, so now we have 3 more months of data.
I haven't read this except for scanning it, and I'm like, I can imagine how Martin's going to go to.
Suggest the format for your response. Positives, negatives, clown worlds.
No, I haven't followed that format at all. Anyway, I don't follow everything Trump does that closely, especially a lot of what he says is just a tactic rather than a real plan. There are certainly good signals early on, but the results appear rather mixed. Mass deportations aren't happening anywhere as much as they need to, but it does seem fewer people are trying to get into the US legally. To my knowledge, nothing has been done about legal immigration. Then there was the tariff issue. It was clearly mostly game rather than a serious effort for reindustrialization, which would involve keeping sufficiently high tariffs in place. How Iran was handled could have been far worse, but it wasn't staying out like people voted for, and clearly demonstrates how much control Israel retains. Ukraine likewise still keeps receiving weapons. Add the Russian Epstein stuff on top of all this, and it's undeniable that Trump is entirely part of the swamp. As a European, I found responses of some of our so-called leaders to Trump's rhetoric encouraging, insofar they signaled we have to leave the American sphere. Their motivations may have been dumb and wrong, but being forced to actually behave like a sovereign power instead of being kept as a dependent has a tendency to make the country start behaving sane again, even if that necessitates replacing the leaders. But the moment has passed, and as usual, nothing ever happens.
I would say that in general, if our hopes were 100%, we're getting 20% of it.
And I want to add on top to that. So one thing, in terms of Trump's tactics, call it his tactics or his administration's tactics or whoever runs him's tactics or whatnot. But the one thing I notice is his favorite tactics is he starts with, just like how he negotiated in Art of the Deal, right? He starts with an untenable position, an outrageous offer.
Yep.
But through that outrageous offer, it makes his actual offer seems reasonable.
Correct.
So
well, that's why I wasn't commenting on Canada becoming 51st state or whatever. It's obviously not happening.
But then it may seem like he hasn't moved far enough, because we certainly did not get his 100% or 120% thing that he asked for, but we did get the 20%. And one thing I would add on top of that is, if you do this often enough, then eventually it does move the position to where we want it to be.
Correct.
A lot of people give him shit about not doing enough, not realizing we are actually marching towards those directions.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where the position of president, it's amazing what level of power it does have, but it's also amazing what level of power it does not have.
Yes.
It does not have the power to make laws, and to make any of these changes permanent, we need to make those into law.
Well, he got this big bill through, right?
Mm-hmm.
It had a lot of this shit in it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was skeptical about that. So I was pleased.
One thing that, I mean, this is probably minute, but it's I'm just using it to show a point. So those outside the U.S. or don't really follow guns probably doesn't care or didn't even notice that's in a Big Beautiful Bill. But apparently the Big Beautiful Bill has reduced the tax stamp associated with suppressor purchase to 0. It used to be $200 when NFA first put into effect back in 1933. So $200 back then was equivalent to $5,000. So basically, they made these suppressors, short barrel rifles, and so on a rich man's only game. And now they've gotten rid of it completely. You may say, well, what's the whole point? It's just $200 is not a lot of money. But what it paves a way to is the legal argument now that you don't really need this NFA at all. So gutting it one small pace at a time.
Yes. Which is how you break down a bureaucratic set of layers, right? All right. So do you want me to do my thing now?
Yes, please.
Martin's right, and Francis is explicitly correct. From every word out of Trump's mouth is negotiating. The level of deportations, I'm not following it, but I'm surprised at how small the numbers have been. But what's happening is, as expected, the left is organizing to use organized violence to react to it. So I think they're going to give us, in other words, give those of us who want to increase the removal of illegals, they're going to give us motivation. I think that will take time. The tariff game was a shock and awe game. I think it largely worked for what he was trying to say, which was that the U.S. has burned its own people in its market in order to bring the rest of the world into the common market, and that we're not going to burn our people anymore. So this is just the step that I expected to take. I didn't expect him using tariffs as much as he's using them, but because we actually have money, it's more effective than I thought it would be.
What do you mean by because we have money is more effective?
Because the U.S. we have a heavily consumption-driven economy, right? Which we don't like about ourselves, to be honest, right? But that means that if you want to make money in this world, you want to sell here.
Yeah, and
it's still like that. Because the effort per sale, right, and the returns on that sale are higher. So it's the same thing as Europe, but Europe has a lot of problems, mostly because since they are not they are a weaker federal system than ours, which I don't like. I don't like ours is stronger, but the benefit of our federal system is that we don't have to have what's the tax? The value-added tax.
VAT.
Right, but we don't have to have that. Whereas Europe, because of the value-added different places, if it was just a sales tax, that would leave it would be harmful to the places that produce versus the places that consume. And so they use a value-added tax to capture whatever value is made by whatever bit of production. The problem is 20%. I guess it's 20%. Is it like 20% on average? I think is what it is. That's fucking insane, right? That's 20% is the total tax burden you wanna stay under for an entire population. So it's crazy. So.
Well, if that's the case, the U.S. is already above 20%.
No, I
talking about total tax
that.
burden.
I'm there, right? So when it comes to this tariff game and the different tax schemes or whatever, trade games, Europe should be as good a market as the U.S., but everything's just frankly so much more expensive, and people have far less money. I mean, it's one of the
Europe. So then, what Europe is actually doing is they're subsidizing their producers at the expense of their domestic consumers. By
Correct.
taxing the domestic consumers, they're in fact protecting the producers are left.
Right, but they want to keep the redistributable money in the country, right? And so if they don't find some way to capture the value added, right? They feel like they're missing out and they're giving up. They're producing all this value but not getting any returns on it, because really, what you want in a perfect world is a sales tax on one end and an income tax on the other. But a sales tax is just, sales tax is small, right? It's just that's a commission for handling transactions, and an income tax should be largely for relatively well-off people, right? And that should be your tax limit. Then the rest should just be fees. Like, we live in a town with too many fucking rich people, Francis, right? And so they don't mind taxing the fuck out of us, right? I'm seeing if I can get a reaction out of you. I wasn't getting a reaction. I expected to
Which
get
is why I want to move.
This is why you want to move, exactly.
I don't mind being taxed if my tax dollars are being used in proper places, but not, getting taxed so that they can build a low-income housing or build this $100 million city hall that's ugly and being underutilized. And
Yes,
you've seen the ugly downtown park that spent $100 million built.
Exactly.
Well, I support protective tariffs because of incentives they create. What is done with the money is, of course, a separate matter.
Yes. Anyway, so that's the tariff and et cetera issue. I'm on Martin's side here with Iran, though. Look, though we're the only people that can use bunker busters, right? And we're not going to give that tech to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all right. So
we have bunkers that we don't want to get busted.
Well, the problem is you need a fucking elephant plane.
Yeah, you basically need B-52 and B-2 bombers to carry that thing. That's like 30,000 pound bomb.
Yeah.
You can't carry that in an F-35, certainly.
And so I was like, well, they dropped, what, 12 of them or something like that?
Yeah, a good, great number of them.
Right.
Multiple redundancy.
But we don't even know how successful that was. On the other hand, I'm like, okay, that's not sending our boys off to war. That's taking out a nuclear threat, right? I can sort of go with that one. I'm not as severe as Martin is probably on that. As for Ukraine, of course, I'm happy that they get weapons. I just don't want us to be the burden carrier. And what Trump is trying to do is make Europe take responsibility for Europe. And as Martin said, it looked great, but I'm not sure. I don't know if you think you know where it's going, Martin, but I'm not really terribly impressed with the capacity.
My impression is in Zurich that the war is fake, but the massacres are real.
Let's say that again.
It's basically over oligarch squabbles.
The war is real, but the war is fake, but the massacre is real.
Yeah, Slavs are dying on both sides for no good reason.
Yes. And the recent, I don't care about Epstein. I really don't care. I finally spent about an hour looking into it yesterday, and there's a lot of hypothesis, but I can't find much evidence. I was mostly interested in whether it was about Trump, and it's hard to say any Epstein's stuff would stick to Trump because there's too many records on it of what he's really doing, which is really just sharing his plane and working together on a real estate deal. Even when he went to the Epstein places, he took his family with him. I don't think there's any. I think there's no little smoke and no fire.
Yeah, I don't think Trump is as Elon Musk accused him of what is a child raper or something. Because if that's true, the Democrats they would have crucified him already 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like, Bill Clinton's. If anybody would philander, it would be Bill Clinton, right? And he was there a bunch, right? I mean, so I don't know.
Except they're trying to. The left is trying to protect Bill Clinton.
Of course. So
it might be mutually assured destruction if they open that up.
Yes, exactly.
It might take down everyone.
Yeah.
So
and maybe that. Go ahead.
My point is, I don't care about this shit. If you find it's true that there's an intel operation that's run by Mossad or something, or the U.S. or a combination of it, they're trying to get leverage on these fucking guys, right? Then that's something I want to know about. If it's a bunch of it's Maxwell and what's his name and Epstein, bringing in. I had no idea it was that many underage girls to use as bait, because I thought it was like, this is me and my ignorance. I thought
tens
it was like,
rather than thousands.
I thought it was like single digits first.
Oh, single digits? No.
Right? No, I'm an idiot. No, I'm telling you, this is me, right? So I was having the same conversation yesterday. I said, look, I'm thinking yacht chicks. Do you know what yacht girls are in Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. So what is much? They call up a bunch of hot chicks, and they bring them. They pay them $10,000 to spend the day or the weekend on the yacht, and any extra recreational income they make is up to them. Right? It's not.
They're basically running a floating brothel.
Well, but it's not. That's a private affair between private people, right? Right. And they, it is my understanding, not that I haven't been to one of those in the States. My understanding is they like to keep it where there's not going to be illegal backlash to them, right? So, though it would surprise people. How many famous actresses today have been yacht chicks?
I am sure they slept their way. This is just
unbelievable number.
Yeah, this is just part of course in Hollywood. I mean, let's think of it this way. I mean, you may be surprised by a number, right? I'm thinking, right? You have a several $100 million yacht, and then you bring, say, 2 dozens of the elite there. You can't have single-digit chicks. You gotta have at least 2 or 3 per every elite that you bring there. So that's automatically in the dozens. So then that's one boat trip. And you're not going to have the same girls. So how long was it in operation? Like 20 years, right? You multiply that number, multiplied by that number. Let's say it's one trip every month, and easily you get into thousands.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, there's things I can talk about and not, but my experience as working the game in Ukraine and Russia is I've gotten invited to these parties, right? And they bring what they call models. Lots
like
of
Hollywood models.
Well, well, I mean, the problem with Ukraine and Russia is like 80% of the girls are 9s, right? I mean, it's like, I'm exaggerating, of course, but there's an absurd number of attractive Slavic women there, right? And so they come up to you and they try to get you to buy. It's like go to a strip club. They try to get you to buy drinks, right? They try to get you to order food, get stuff for them, right? So they're commissioned, right, on what they sell, right?
I know exactly what you mean, because in another life I was doing that. Another lifetime ago, I was doing that in Beijing.
Yes, exactly. And so the way it worked is that for me, I wanted to arrange bumps, right? So I'm trying to. My whole job is, can I get access to either somebody in the judiciary or somebody in the oligarchs? I mean, most of the time, that's what I was trying to get access to. And the judiciary is funny because they came to me, right? Because I had the think tank. So all of a sudden, I'm like giving lessons to judges, right? With discussion, not lessons, but discussions with judges and clerks and things. So I ended up having to not pursue that. But the oligarchs, their people are always sniffing around. It's like fucking gangsters, right? They're always looking for something to steal or whatever, right? Well, these guys are looking for investors, and of course, one of my covers, because I was really doing it, was as an angel investor, and so I get invited to all sorts of shit, right? And the girls will, Ukraine is different from Russia because it's harder to get an interaction there than Russia, where it's sort of a given. Um, but they do work you, and that is part of the fucking game. So the game I'm playing in is more of a political one, right? It's more political than anything else. But I get the yachting club, yachting game. But the Epstein thing, I'm like, I don't know. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and I said, look, I'm fucking paranoid, right? And Trump is paranoid. He doesn't smoke, drink, do drugs, right? And even if he's fucking around with his wife, he's using a professional, right? Right? I mean, he's in other words, he gets a professional like a stripper or a fucking porn star.
Stormy Daniels.
He doesn't get an imperial entanglement. Does that mean, with a woman? And so, not that it didn't happen, and not that he's not a bit of a womanizer, because certainly any guy, I mean, I don't know. I was having a discussion with a woman the other day. I was like, Stan, if you're a guy and you're like in that sphere, women throw themselves at you all the time. Right? It's not like you have to work to get sex, right? It's just like you just take an opportunity. And he owned a modeling agency at one time, Trump and whatever, and all this other shit. So I look at this and I'm like, I don't know, because I'm like, I don't want anything dangerous near me. Trump's at least as paranoid as I am. He manages his reputation carefully, and so I'm just like, I have a hard time believing that a guy like Trump has to go to Epstein Island to get laid. I just can't see it. I mean,
I think it's not so much that he goes to Epstein's Island to get laid, unlike Bill Clinton or whatever, but rather the refusal to release the Epstein files portrays him as a swamp creature, or portrays him as going back on his promises among the MAGA supporters.
Correct. And so when he came back and he said, I can't remember which it was. I think it was the JFK stuff. He said, yeah, well, I said that, but it turns out that there's people still alive whose lives would be ruined by the harassment that they would receive if we included information about them. That was just being a decent person.
Yeah.
The problem in this case is he didn't come out and say, look, this is going to turn into a shitstorm for everybody. I've got really right. He didn't come out and say,
no.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, what
he
the
said,
fuck?
He said there's no list.
Well, did he really say that? Is that true? I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he said that.
Oh, okay. Fuck. What? I have no idea why that would come out.
Well, regardless, some people deserve to have their lives ruined, and sometimes shitstorm need to happen.
Yeah, I'm not. The problem is that, let's say I'm interviewed as whatever during the process, and I knew these people, right? But this is like in the 60s, right? When I was a little kid. What if you're like an old person and you were the kind of person who was verbally involved, but you had nothing to do with the assassination. You just happen to know people, right? Or something. Or you made a bad decision because you didn't believe what was really something, right? We all make stupid stuff like that.
Okay, I realize Trump did not say that, but the DOJ has concluded, concluded there's no evidence of an incriminating clients list. And that his death in 2019 is a suicide.
Yeah, Mafia has concluded that Mafia did nothing wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about. I mean, I used to work for Justice Department, and I didn't think too much of their work ethic. Let me say it that way. But I didn't have I didn't distrust them. Now I don't fucking trust them at all. It's like the problem. It's like the opposite. It's the same with the FBI. I get this guy's card. Where's this guy's card? This guy's. I won't pronounce his name out, right? This FBI guy I talked to recently. He's like, and then he's a fucking street cop. That's, you know, he's got a 105 IQ. I mean, why is this guy fucking talking to me? So anyway, where are we on this? I think we've covered the fucking issue, haven't we? Covered the issue. Yep. So the answer is, what's the guy really asking? It's been 100 days. I see a bunch of conservatives who come too quickly, so to speak, expecting that you can move this fucking behemoth like with a wave of your hand, and instead of that, this is an 8 to 12 year project because of the size of the government and the number of actors. So it's working like I expect, perhaps better than I expected, but it's not going to work well enough for the average I come too quick, impulsive conservative thinks that everything is easy to do if you just show up and wave your hand.
What it demonstrates to me is, again, there are no democratic solutions.
I've been trying to think since, was it yesterday we had a conversation about this? I've been trying to think, well, I'm foolishly optimistic, right? Which is what you've been saying all along. And the truth is that I'm willing to act as if there are, but the evidence, I mean, I've written a whole fucking book on this, right? The evidence is that it doesn't happen.
Democracy is there just for a show.
Yeah. To get power. It's a way to shift power, but then it becomes the way to destroy the civilization. It's fucking awful.
Actual ruling class is immune from democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's by design.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. We say by design. I'm like, you know, if you deal with these people, there's none of them that smart. You know, it's just not.
It doesn't mean that they can't devise a system that maximizes their.
It's they actually practice incrementalism, which is in the process is deterministic. So it looks like it's brilliant strategy, but it's not. It's just.
No, but here's the thing, right? I figured out long ago in life that smart and quote accomplishments don't exactly map one-to-one. In fact, I've also seen very smart people who are just kind of laid back. And it's actually the 120 IQs, i.e. that's who are not very smart, as long as they apply consistent incrementalism, consistent work, they can achieve a lot of outward things. You know, now multiply that by several generations, and you get a system that's very entrenched to protect the not power, but not benefit. I'm trying to find the right words to protect the interests of them and their descendants.
Right, and so that's why I say you don't have to be particularly bright in whatever. You just follow the incentives, and because Martin's right. You follow the incentives, and you end up with this whenever you put democracy in place. Well, and Martin, let me ask you your pessimism. Let me ask this question. We use a jury, right? And the jury model has been incredibly successful in history, right? As long as the jury is too big to bribe.
As long as it's homogeneous and corresponding
Correct.
to the population.
You are correct. Now, if I were to say that people had to demonstrate sort of competency, virtue, loyalty, whatever, and that 10% or 20% of people could then vote. Would you think that would be viable?
It would be an improvement, but it's still not ideal, I think.
Okay. Because my understanding is that the problem gets to be scale. In other words, what I would like is, of course, is a monarchy and a cabinet, right? And that would and a judiciary. That's what I'd like, right? Uh, because I want it to run like a business, right? But the problem is when you build, let's say, if you build a conglomerate, you have to get information from all these bits and pieces of your production model, right? And I'm just like, well, I, I, and the second thing is you want buy-in from them, right? If you're going to make anything, especially if you're going to raise revenues. So, from my standpoint, if it's most men, all right, and it's mostly men who've demonstrated certain things, right? Uh, why wouldn't I want them to act like a jury? I don't mean like legislative jury. I mean that if the monarchy and the cabinet come up with a policy, they can vote it up and down. What do you think about that? Or do I need to give you time to think about that one?
That's still improvement. What I heard in there is that you want to run a nation like a business, which is where a fundamental difference between us is. I view nation as an army, not a business.
Oh, I see. I'm only I see what you're thinking, and so you are in favor more of the Prussian or the Italian model, which is that you're a cohesive army first, and that the economy is your supply chain, right? Your supply, what do you call it? Your logistics problem. Is that sort of like how you think about it?
It's there to allow army maintain sovereignty.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I would disagree with you. I think I don't usually think in that level, and this is something else that I took away from our conversation yesterday. It was I don't know, it was Wednesday or yesterday, I don't remember, which was that I am so Anglo and I'm so used to having sovereignty that I don't think about how hard that is to have, and therefore how much you have to be more a military that has an economy as logistics versus an economy that is backed by a military. And I think that change in my thinking has to come about. You do get through to me, Martin. It takes a while. It's just.
I don't know how you can be used to having sovereignty when Anglos haven't had it for so long.
Well, Americans. Americans as a country, we have military might.
Country, yes, but who controls the country?
Yes, exactly. All right.
All right, let's move on. Next question. Question 3 from Suki. What would a practice for enhancing one's cognitive ability for continuous recursive and disambiguation look like? A practice that one can practice throughout the day, like mindfulness. Thank you.
I've never consciously done this. It's more like an intuition for me, but I suppose I would recommend considering various sentences you're saying or hearing and whether you can disambiguate all the terms into precise definitions to a point where no conflation is possible, or whether you find some verbal trickery in the process.
Great. So just for the audience, Martin's the only person that sort of was able to do this nearly instantaneously. We haven't had anybody else be able to do it as fast as Martin did. So he's obviously wired for this kind of thing. Um, I think Martin's correct. There's two things. One other thing you can do, you can try to operationalize a sentence, which he's what Martin. The thing I notice myself doing every day, all the time, is when somebody says something, I try to put it on a spectrum. I say what's less than that and what's more than that, and what are the limits of it, and what do those things have in common. So that's the part where we say, so there's operationalism into a sentence, which is what Martin said, and there's disambiguation by enumeration, like making a list of the things, uh, operationalization, which is turning them into operational terms, and disambiguation, which is uh, redefining each term without overlap, right? So you have to make a choice. This term is going to mean this term is going to mean this term to mean this. Once you practice that, that and operationalizing sentences, I think the thing of disambiguating into measures allows you to look at things clearly, and then concepts clearly. And then when you get into operationalizing sentences, it gets you to look at sentences clearly. And so I think if you do those two things, Martin's correct. If you do those two things, you can get to it relatively quickly. Um, the other thing you can do is take our list of reciprocity, truth, demonstrated interests, reciprocity, and truth. We'll take those three lists, and whenever you're looking at something, see if it see what tests it passes of that list. It's a demonstrated interest. It passes these tests of reciprocity, but not this one. It passes these tests of truth, but not these two. Well, if it doesn't pass those three tests, it's not true. But at least you know what's not true, right? So that's the third piece I would say is useful. The fourth one, which is the social science one, is to start with sex differences, including the neutral position, right? So masculine, feminine, and the neutral, because you have to you can't just divide everything perfectly because most of us are in overlap. And then you go from there to the three means of cooperation, three choices of cooperation, the three means of influence, and the elites, the three institutions, and then the institutional sequence of development. That's actually the whole model. I went over the whole model just now. From Martin starting out to go over the whole model. You can practice those things and you'll get it. Unfortunately, that's what five categories. So like five categories of things you have to practice, and most people that's a lot, and partly because they try to do it all at once. But when we started with libertarians, it was easy for them to work from reciprocity outward. I don't know what Martin, what did you understand first, Martin, and get out from? Do you remember? It's hard to remember, I know.
Yeah, it's been like 7 years now, I think.
Yes, yeah. So you can't do it.
Well, we were writing posts on all sorts of stuff, and I found most of it interesting.
Yeah. So
I think the first thing I got was just the use of the copula to be
yes.
enables multiple avenues of lying, and
Yes.
that lying you don't have to have how should I put it? You don't have to have the intentional lie in order to lie. Like if you, i.e., the NLI definition of lying is much broader. Anything that falls short of testimonial truth is lying.
Yep. And so, I have been asking everybody so that I can learn how they learn that, but it's there's no concrete pattern. It used to be, because I was working with libertarians, that they would come in from the ethics and learn, right? Francis just learned about the grammar and lying, right? Martin looked at the whole fucking thing, right? I mean, but so I have no idea how people get into this. I can only tell you that if I wanted to teach it to you, I would teach the 5 basics that I just listed, and you would just practice those over and over. Um, and the thing I analogize in my own learning is that I when I was only 21 or 22, I got sent away to got sent away to camp. No, uh, on-site training, right? Not on their site training by a bunch of psychologists, right? Into personality profiling, and a second one on persuasion. Uh, and the problem with personality profiling is you just have to do a lot of it. It's like doing math, right? You just have to do a lot of it, and then it happens. It's the same thing, and it's the same thing with persuasion. You just have to do a lot of it. And I remember like sweating during the persuasion courses, because I just couldn't make myself do it. Right? It was so hard for me to do it, but then I just sort of gave in, and I could. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you have to. People think they're going to get our stuff in, like it's, the non-aggression principle. I mean, you're not going to get our stuff like that. It's not going to happen. Martin, anything? Anything just add to that?
I remember a very good introduction back then was Eli's intro for Barry.
Yeah, I remember reading that. All right, shall we move on?
Yep.
All right, question 4 from Suki. The NLI and quote and reality makes it easier to understand Judaism and Islam civilization destroying strategies, but I never got a crystal clear idea of Christianity's tactics of destruction. Can you comprehensively elucidate Christianity's strategy with examples included? Thank you.
It's not due to anything specific to Christianity. It's just all the other things it shares with other kinds of Abrahamism. And often it's been the revolutionary spirit that possesses the people when they take the Old Testament too seriously. Back in Rome, Christianity was originally a sect of Judaism, and Christians sometimes use outright Talmudic tactics like defacing statues to destroy the previous culture. Protestant revolutions were very destructive as well, although they were not entirely without cause. The corruption of the church was very real. On top of that, clergy at every age was protective of Jewry, which allowed them to practice their own subversion, protected from justified peasant wrath. And this is at its extreme today in the instance of American evangelicals, where the term Judeo-Christians applies as much as it ever did.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know if I can, that's worth a book. that statement. That's worth a book. So yeah.
A few people wrote such books, like E. Michael Jones and Lauren Guiano.
Well, the way you put it, I like that the hide behind X while you undermine, right? Or seek protection. They used to seek protection from the state, right, to undermine the people. And today they seek protection from the evangelicals, which is weird to me.
Wait, what do you mean they seek protection from the evangelicals?
It goes back to at least Augustine, who called them older brothers in faith, who must be.
Oh, you mean the Jews seek protection
Yes.
from evangelicals? Oh, yeah.
But also they get into the state so that they can feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
which would be fine if their nepotism wasn't as aggressive, which they would say that makes no sense, and if they stayed out of seditious occupations, which they say that's the source of our wealth. Without the source of our wealth, we have no access to power, and without our unanimity, we have no reason to obtain power. So it's very, very logical what they do. But what's his original question?
Nice.
Problem with Christianity is that it's a peasant slave religion, or peasant women slave religion, that just as women always seek to undermine men, these religions seek to undermine men and aristocracy in particular as the expression of men. And so Christianity was able to take advantage of the fact that Greece and Rome had an aristocratic civilization. It was top down, and that the common people and slaves and often women were treated somewhat like domesticated animals. Now, they weren't treated horribly in most cases. As a matter of fact, there were laws against treating people horribly, but they weren't considered equals, and that the idea of equality would have been hysterical to any of them. So Christianity came in and said, here's a way that you women, the people at the bottom, the peasantry, and the slaves can give each other status, and you can claim you're virtuous by not doing wrong, which is hard to imagine because you can't, unless you like study Saturnalia and some of these other, or even in England. By the time Jack and the Green in England is a chimney sweep, right? But it was the same thing. Throughout history, there are days that celebrate the poor, and where they can go around and beg for things, or they can go around and get treated like they're a better class member, whatever. So this culture exists in the West for a long time. But what Christianity did was it allowed them to take on the airs of respectability, etc. Right, so just as the Jews had, right, by essentially ritual and not doing wrong, instead of doing right, and that's an important distinction. If you're in the aristocratic society, you need to have some sort of power to be valuable, but the peasants have no power. So what did they do? They didn't do it by positiva, contribution of the commons. They did it by negativa, contributing the commons by not doing bad. So the problem was they went around and destroyed, just like we have people destroying our Civil War statues, when the North wanted the South to have statues of their heroes or whatever. This is a common way of reconciliation in the West. Well, that's not okay for the Marxists, right? That's not okay for the left. They have to destroy heroes.
Well, the Christians also destroyed the ancient Roman gods, which is really a form of hero worship.
Correct. So they destroyed them all, and they destroyed it. They burned everything. They either they cast the philosophers out or killed them. So I mean, there's not a lot of difference between what the Soviets did and what the Christians did.
I don't even blame the peasants. Who manipulated them? That's the question.
Right. All right.
All right. Next question, also from Suki. Can the NLI evaluate Buddhism in terms of its opinions of it, how it operates on an intra-civilizational and extra-civilizational level, and in relation to natural law? Thank you. Quote, when I refer to Buddhism, I'm primarily referring to early Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. Okay, I don't know that word.
those distinctions tell me nothing. I'm just not that informed. Although I've read some examples where Buddhists talk about violence as justified and act on it, such as against communists or Muslims or for a nationalist cause, it's unclear to me as an outsider how much of that has to do with any Buddhist dogma and how much is simply treating Buddhism as an aesthetic tradition and otherwise coming to terms with reality. In this respect, it appears similar to Christianity, where taking it too seriously is suicidal, or in any case makes one politically irrelevant, and most successful Christian societies reinterpreted the scripture as something compatible with how the real world works, or simply ignore the contradictions.
Well done. Here's how I would frame it, is that if you look at natural law ethics, which are just aristocratic ethics, right, in the same argument, is that our ethics, our aristocratic ethics, are about doing, right? How to do things, how to get things done. They're about accepting reality or manipulating reality. But Buddhism's core is actually a therapeutic ethics. It's therapeutic, an individual, and an act of withdrawal. It's not like the Western ethics or the natural law ethics, which is an effort to produce a legal moral system to advance cooperation and cause, right? And so I view it as a passive, Buddhism is a pacifist, somewhat hopeless way of getting through life under the presumption that nothing you can do can change the conditions of the world, only that you can change your reaction to it. This same principle, part of this principle, lives on in Stoicism, which is, but it's more of the things you can't control than you can control how you react to them. But Stoicism is still an empowerment religion or philosophy, which seeks to have you achieve the best you can be within the context of the aristocratic society. So, for example, you go with so our world tries to foster cooperation, and Buddhism tries to foster non-interference. So I can find another note here. So Buddhism evolved as a means of pacification under conditions of high Malthusian pressure in caste societies. It functioned to reduce male conflict and female instability by a moral suppression. It is a parasite-resistant adaptation. This is important. And so it attempts to reduce conflict by suppressing group competitiveness. Now, natural law is very different. It forms moral systems as the solutions to the problem of computation, which is figuring things out under constraint. So our natural law is an evolutionary, which is in Buddhism an equilibrial group strategy. So in the end, natural law demands positive reciprocity, and Buddhism demands negative withdrawal. And so I used to say it in simple terms is that if the world is too much chaos around you, Buddhism is a very good strategy for producing mindfulness. That's a very good individualist strategy under lots of constraint. If you are able to organize because most of European history means that the society is formed as a militia, right? A military. A militia is different from a military, but it's formed as a militia. is that people had more reason to work together than not. And so it's an activist. Western theory is more activist. I hope that answers this question.
What you said just made me realize maybe the reason why Buddhism found such fertile adaptation in Far East Asia, i.e. China, Korea, Japan, and so on, or at least because at least in China's case, the state is very dominant, and as the lower class, instead of adopting Stoicism, which is an active form of mindfulness practice, that the only venue that's available for the lower class is the passive, right?
Yeah.
I.e., don't try to become agentic, don't make waves, because you can, otherwise there are very few venues that offer to you for making such waves. Okay, shall we move to question 6?
Yep.
All right, from Yasin. I've recently been introduced to Jacque Lacan's psychoanalytic epistemology. After some study, I believe it is our most penetrating, powerful technology for analyzing humans subjectively. If science is the methodology that allows man to understand the world of systems, then Lacan's model is a lens that allows man to understand his world of symbols. What do you guys think of Lacan's model of human subjectivity?
Apologies, but I'm not making that investment just to answer the question. I did check the wiki and I wasn't terribly impressed and would a priori regard any kind of Freudianism as pseudoscience that's secretly trying to justify something. You'd have to be more specific about why you think it's so good, why you think it's the best description of some phenomenon that isn't so much better described elsewhere. Sorry for non-answer.
Well, it is an answer. You said it's pseudoscience. All right. So there's a thing called there's science, right? Which is the gradual progression of all knowledge into consistency and coherence across all scales, right? All right. And then there are ways of thinking, frameworks. Now, can tell you, because I've studied this, not this particular thing, but how the mind evolves. And that if you're at a certain age, a certain place in your development, for example, you might like the ethics that are taught to children, right? Then you might like the ethics that are more rule-based, right? That are taught to young adults and adults. And that's because you have more knowledge to work with, more understanding to work with. And then if you have lots of knowledge and understanding, you're going to work with outcome ethics. And so during your life, you move from something that is easily imitable, right? Because it's reliant ethics that are reliant on feelings, to ethics that are reliant on rules, to ethics that are reliant on outcomes. The same thing is in ways of thinking. This is an immature way of thinking. It's using vague terminology to break the world into a simple way of thinking. So that in the future you may be able to handle the scientific way of thinking. Or it's saying that you can't handle the scientific way of thinking. And so you can come up with this story. So I know this one, I know of this particular thing, right? How it sort of works. But there are much better, clearer, less mythical, because this is a mythic. This is a mythic. It's a mythicism, right? It's a way of thinking. It's not a way of you learning how to think operationally about the world and how it really works. It's a way of you, from your current lack of knowledge, to sort of get some intuition about that which you're studying. So So this is a story. It's like a parable, and the parable is broken down into pieces, and you can do it. Now, if you want to say it describes the subjective experience, that's the tell that you're doing what I said, which is that you need the subject to feel the subjective experience because you're not ready yet to think in the objective experience. That's okay. This is a developmental cycle we all go through. We start out as children, we become young or mature adults, then we become experienced, older, wiser, at least some of us do, become older and wiser adults. Some of us have to learn intuitionally and slow, and some of us can learn operationally and fast, right? I mean, it just depends on what gifts you're given. So, what do I think of it? I think it's a nice parable for immature minds to deal with if they lack the will, ability, or resources to study the science. And if that works for you, and then someday you want to move beyond it into the science, then that will work for you too. It's not like you have to go, everybody has to go to the hard way right away. You just use whatever ladder. The problem you get with these ways of thinking is they don't become ladders, they become platforms. And so you get stuck on a platform and you think it's right, and then it starts to fail, and then you've missed all those opportunities to keep growing and climbing the ladder of knowledge.
Well, I'm happy to give him benefit of the doubt that there were some real insights, but I need to see specific claims to evaluate. I'm just not going to read the whole book.
It's very simple, Martin. It's not complicated at all. Uh, not complicated at all. It's what it's trying to do is it's trying to. A lot of people live in intuition. Some of us learn to live in to experience intuition and to hold that separate from reason, and so that we can make use of both. Some people have a very difficult time trying to reason anything without preservation of access and use of intuition. And so, uh, what these things do is they give people the tools to understand the way they can understand, which is with intuition, and maybe eventually they'll learn enough to be able to move to understanding with reason and relying on intuition. But thinking objectively is hard. I mean, it's easy for you. I mean, you're a fucking master of it. But is it easy for you? What?
It also took time and constantly willing to update.
Correct. All right. What else? You done?
Questions?
No, we're not done.
I was going to say, move on to the next question. Are we done?
Yep.
What's this one? Yeah. From Suki. Question 7 from Suki. Given that disciplines concerned with cognitive phenomena such as neuroscience, artificial intelligence, cognitive science, economics, sociology, quantum physics, and systems science, each confronts a common constraint involving functionally significant yet immaterial constructs that evades direct observation, traceability, and quantifiable measurement, i.e., memory, perception, and attention. We can only see how it behaves. What interventions or innovations, if any, can resolve this constraint? What form could a viable solution take? Or does access to manipulate such constructs remain confined to the original entity, e.g., a person performing deliberate modification to their own cognitive state, exactly as he intends, while external systems continue to lack the resolution or access required to achieve equivalent precision? This constraint blocks development trajectories in several medium to long-term technologies, including bioengineering, artificial intelligence, and advanced brain-computer interface, e.g., systems that could enable high-fidelity knowledge implementation, such as downloading fluency in Ukrainian. by preventing external agents from performing create, edit, transfer, and delete operations on cognitive content with the same reliability afforded by operations on computer code or written language. Side note, not necessary to read. Sorry for asking so many questions. Okay.
You don't care. Ask all the questions you want.
Yes.
Probably not a sufficient answer, but I think those fields are hardly in the same category, so the answer would differ for each. Current primary constraint of economics and sociology is, of course, all the lies, and putting an end to those alone will move us very far. On the other hand, neuroscience and artificial intelligence hitting some hard limit frankly sounds like a preferable option to me, because we're just getting more elaborate means of social control here. I think people that are seriously looking forward to Neuralink are completely deranged.
I think of how to answer the question. The first is that I'm not sure that the assumptions here are right. When we look at the brain or the quantum background, we enter into two categories of problems. The first is any attempt to observe interferes with the phenomenon, because you have to use instrumentation, and the instrumentation has to do something that is, I mean, most things give off light, right? So as long as the thing's giving off light, we don't have to interfere with it in order to observe it. But you know, if you've got to poke a thing, or you've got to bounce a thing off something, or you have to project radio waves against something or electricity against something to observe it, then you know you're interfering with it. In the case of the subatomic realm, we simply haven't figured out a way to do that with any precision. And because of that, we can't observe it with any precision. Although I'm kind of impressed that, you know, we can take a thin sheet of gold and look at the gold atoms on it. Now they look like little whirlwinds, right? These little tiny whirlwinds, or some little balls of light, really, that are all spinning and madly spinning all over the place. But they stay in cohesive, you know, order. So you can we can see individual atoms of gold, right? So, but we can't see what's inside, what those atoms are made of, right? We can only see, let's say, you know, when we create some effect by them, like, I don't know if you know what a smoke chamber is, but that's how we know about spin and that kind of stuff. So when we go to the brain, it's even more, it's a bit more complicated, because you can't do anything without damaging something. It's very hard to do anything when observing the brain without damaging anything. The truth is that some of the imaging processes we have are quite powerful, but then you have the opposite problem. If I'm looking at an atom, right, on gold, right, I may not be able to increase my resolution from it without projecting something against it, so that I can somehow sense and reorganize what's ever bounced off it, if light can't bounce off it. But when you're talking about neural levels, I mean, these things are likewise very small. They're dependent upon chemical exchanges, which are very small, and they happen in vast numbers in parallel. And so it's sort of like a statistics game. Some things, like the entropy of gases when put in a chamber, which they'll evenly distribute, right? Can only be described statistically, because and statistically, in other words, as groups, right, as populations. And that's largely true of neural activity. We can see what's happening, right? For example, we can show where and how in a brain, as you move through a set of rooms, it's developing it's creating a coordinate system that basically creates a mental map in your hippocampal region of the area you're in, the parietal cortex or whatever. All right. And we can see which neurons are firing that, and that these neurons fire together when you're in this corner of the room. And we actually divide all the, think of it as you could spin around with your arms out, right? We actually mentally divide every room we walk into into spaces like that, basically hexagons. And so our brains store a coordinate of each hexagon as we move through it. And it stores our head direction, our motion, our body, because your you is basically here. Whenever you're doing anything, you is here, and your head direction, your eye direction, this direction, how your motion, whatever. It stores all that stuff, and it does it really parsimoniously, just as a few little dots, basically. And so, or charges. Um, so when you say this, you say, well, we can't look at it and say, wow, of these right now we can't of these billion neurons being activated in this freaking sequence, whatever. But we can generalize, and we can essentially do the equivalent of statistics and say, well, operationally, this is what's going on. So I'm not sure agree with the premise there. I think the hard part that is implied both in your question of what's his names of this epistemological problem of experience and what you're saying here are related in that what you experience as a human being is a hierarchy of memory, right? A hierarchy of active memory in a continuous stream. And so just think of it as you have a 1 to 3 second buffer, right, of shit that's coming into your head. And it keeps alive the last 3 seconds. And so that's what you're actually experiencing. And what is that experience? When I poke my hand, right, I'm deforming cells. So that deformation gets sent up to my brain, and the neurons that sort of deal with this part of my hand, which are, where are they? They're down here somewhere. The neurons that deal with this part of my hand are, say, in concert. That's I'm being poked by a thing that's not sharp, is a little cold, and whatever. And this because of the rate that neurons sample, I feel it as a continuous thing. But what am I really feeling? I'm feeling a hierarchy of memories, so that that are brought together to symbolize pressure. Whereas I don't feel every individual neuron as a separate thing. I feel the concert of neurons producing essentially a note, which comes, or a chord, which comes up as a fragment, which is comes up as experience. So it's a hierarchy of memory. So when I say that, I mean, it's all purely mechanical. We know how it works. I think the hard part for people to imagine is there is no observer. Everything is memory of memory of memory all the way down.
I would rather say observer is emergent. Not that.
Correct. Yes, that's better. Thank you. The observer is emergent. Thank you. So I actually, you asked 2 questions in a row. I think 2 questions in a row that are actually give me enough information to see how you're thinking, and so then I can come back and say I see what you're doing. But you're doing something that is a rational investigation, but I think you lack the tools to go to actually. It seems mysterious or whatever to you, because the science isn't accessible to you yet. But to me, it's just fucking obvious.
Well, I don't think that he's saying that it's mysterious, but rather what's blocking essentially perfect observability.
It's that no neural impulse on itself has any meaning, right? So just like we say, you need competition to get a piece of information, right? Otherwise, it's just a blink in the dark. Who knows what it is? But everything that's happening is a competition between the existing stimuli, your memory of previous stimuli, and the canceling them out of false stimuli, so that you actually can get an agreement, a contract between these neurons, right, to roll up to the next set of neurons that says, right, which is bigger, says, okay, it's one of these, which rolls up to the next set of neurons and say, okay, it's here on your body, which rolls up to the next set of neurons and says, this is not bad, right? This is okay. It's just a sensation.
Let me reframe the question another way. If we have such level of perfect observability, how every neuron fires and how the is it dendrons? Is that how do you pronounce it? Dendrites connect to another neuron that was able to have this perfect level of observability and trace how signals go from one neuron to another and have this huge amount of data, right? How would that then change the game of brain-computer interface, bioengineering, etc.?
Well, the problem is that brains are grown, and all our brains grow a little bit differently. So the way you think about it is that your brain the neurons, some set of columns, like a region of your brain is connected to a region of your body. Right? That's the easy way to think about it, right? But it doesn't know anything, right? Until it works with that region works with other regions to disambiguate it and attach meaning to it. And so it's this huge market competition for coherence. And so that's why most neurons are suppressing, inhibitory, is that it's trying to filter out stuff so that you only be able to get things that are working in concert together. Does that make sense? Ask me a question in case if I can't. I'm not sure how clear I'm being. So it's actually this competition that provides the calculation. It's not like, we take a picture of the world, right? There's a competition for consistency and coherence across stimuli within a given window of time. And that ends up being brought together in our brain as a sort of episode or a moment. And then there's valence attached to that, right? We weigh the valence of it, the association. And then the next moment happens. And so we're actually detecting, it's not the thing that matters, it's the change that matters. So we experience a world of changes in which we perceive consistencies. Boy, I don't know how to do that any better off the top of my head. I have to think about doing that any better off the top of my head. It made some sense to you because I know when things make sense to you.
Well, I understand where Sukh is coming from, and I have thought about it in similar terms, i.e., the way we approach a lot of the problems in the world today is due to the lack of perfect observability We can only approach it from a Bayesian statistics or just statistics form, right? It's a black box. Let's set down input. We can't even saturate the whole thing with input. It was only our test input because otherwise we essentially co-opt the system and so on.
Yep.
But so, I mean, I work in the high-tech industry, and when you have a cloud service that's constantly running, you cannot put it in a static environment to try to test it. The only way that you can test it is send what's called probers. And these probers are essentially your, some even call it poison pill or whatever, your test message you send through and see and observe how it travels through the rest of the system, through logs and so on, to figure out what comes out the other end, and that can tell you like where it's getting stuck and so on. But by definition, that is not perfect observability, because if you have perfect observability, you're going to be saturated with logs, and your system might as well grind to a halt, and you can't observe. You in the sense, your observability is affecting the system, just like you trying to observe an atom actually changes its nature and so on. Like how do you using the gold example, right?
Yep.
How do you know how gold atoms react or how they behave in a completely isolated environment? You can't, because you can't observe it. So I'm acutely aware of that problem. I guess there's just no magic solution.
There's no magic solution, but think of it this way. Brains are really fucking expensive, right? They're way more expensive than muscles. A fifth of your body's energy goes up to these 3 or 4 pounds in our heads. The human head weighs 8 pounds. No, the human brain weighs 3 or 4 pounds, as far as I know. So when you get up there, think about it. When you want to control your thoughts, like problem solve, do you want to have your attention grasped by everything in your sense perception?
No.
Or do you want to have some valence, some weight attached to it, so that you can choose which thing to focus on? Because all what does focusing do? It just recursively throws the whatever you're focusing on back into the stream of incoming knowledge, incoming stimulation, or even if it's just memory. So if you have too much atomicity, right? Then if you have too much atomicity, then you can't fucking use it, right? It just becomes chaos. If you have, you want enough atomicity to detect anything of meaning or value or utility. And our brains are very good at that. They work with navigation, object, and threat, right? Background, spaces, objects that are useful, and any sense of threat or opportunity. And so we have to focus on things to get more deep knowledge about them. So we're using the same compute power, right, to focus on different scales, right? And we have to use that compute power on different scales because there's only so much compute power, and it's very expensive. So, so there was one other thing you mentioned I wanted to touch on, and I forgot what it was. So there's practical reasons why we behave the way we do. There was something else to know. You said something smart in there, and I lost it. Sorry.
What did I say? I might have implied it. So what I got out of this conversation is it's not so much that having perfect observability at the atomic level can further.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's not so much that this can further our understanding of how, say, just use the brain example, right? How brains work. But rather than understanding rather than understanding all the individual observable pieces, it's much more important to understand how the whole system works.
That's correct. Thank you very much. That was well said. So what can we introspect upon? The truth is we can look at a scene and then we can focus on different parts of it, or a memory, or focus on different parts of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the data that's stored in memory is much sparser than the data that we experience in life. So you just can't always break everything down. And the other thing is, when we break things down, we tend to not because our brains break things down into backgrounds, spaces, uh, objects, and valences, right? Um, that it's just that knowledge is distributed. So anything we think of is a bunch of things tied together to give us that experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we have a photographic record of something, right? It's just all we're doing is making things out of combinations of things. And so, at what point we have this inability to look into things below that level of resolution. So our introspection is limited. I wrote a chapter on this, and I still can't think about it, remember all of it. So what I think people mean is introspection is limited. Well, how would you, as given that, as Martin said, experience is emergent, right? The observer is emergent. If you want to go observe something, how do you observe the observer? Right? Likewise, how do you use the observer to observe something that's going on that's below its level of integration? But in other words, below its existence as an object that's referenceable, when that's how the brain stores information, is objects that are referenceable. I'm just making it worse, aren't I? It's like I can't give a whole class in neuroscience.
I think we probably went into the weeds a little bit and didn't really answer the original question. I mean, we focused on the brain, which is one of the one part of the original question. But I had to reread this question several times to understand what the person's asking. Because I think what it really comes down to is how would perfect observability help or hinder or affect our progress in those sciences. And I think we come to the conclusion that perfect observability is not required to make progress on these sciences, especially when it comes to understanding the system's behavior as a whole.
That's correct. You need an operational description, not a function, or functional one. You don't need what do you call it? You don't need an nth degree of resolution. Matter of fact, and it's the problem is like, all of us might think very similarly about a subject, but if you look at how this information is organized in our brains, it might be complete. It'll make use of similar regions, but with the neural composition within those regions, God knows what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about language, which I find is fascinating, is it makes us believe we are more alike than we are.
That we're more what?
Alike than we are.
Yeah, because it's a common interface. Think of it as a system that speaks that talks on the common protocol. The internal implementation system can be completely different.
Completely different, exactly. So you see this with the study of, and the problem is, like, if you spend enough time looking at like this, what a dinner napkin, how thick a dinner napkin is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like hold over your shirt, and it's like that thickness. That's your brain. It's the shit that's on top, right? The rest of it's all mechanics that make those stuff work. Now that little thing that's only the width of the width of a dinner napkin, it's like basically like my collar, right? It's about
It's about 2 millimeters thick.
Yeah, it's very thin, right? Right, and so all of that, there's 6 layers in there, right? And we know what each of those 6 layers does, right? And it's just basically trying to make all this shit work together. And so you get a column of these things with about 70 or 80 neurons. That's a microcolumn, right? Then you get a macrocolumn, which is God knows how many of them. I've forgotten now. I think it's 50 or 70 or 80, something like that, right? And then you get combinations of those macro columns in a region, and then you get regions, and then there's 50, depending on how you count it, 50 some odd 80 or 80 regions, and they are not. I mean, neurons grow from stem cells, right? They're always going to end up in these columns and regions, right? But it doesn't mean that but if you look at a baby's neural structure, there's nobody fucking home, right? There's not much there. You look at 2, and holy shit, there's a lot of neural connectivity. You look at 4, and oh my god, you look at 7, and it's a fucking forest, right? So this stuff is all grown because our ideas are physical, right? They're physically implemented. They're physically implemented. The logic of them is physically implemented. And think about this, right? We talk about neurons all the time, right? Because neurons are the switch that, if X is true, sends a stimulation down the chain, right? But you start thinking about neurons in a neural column, they're all doing shit back and forth, cooperating and communicating, and to come out with, it's that shape, right? I ate a beer last night. But when I'm trying to get from Francis to laugh. So, but the reality is that if you look at dendrites, they're incomprehensible. It's actually the dendrites that do the computation, right? The neuron just decides if it's sufficient, right? Sufficient agreement has been achieved that we have to send the message downstream. So basically, they vote. And so if you look at you look at a neuron, it's like, oh great, but then you look at the dendrites, and it's a fucking nightmare up there, right? And then you say that's talking about the ones we study. We study pyramidal neurons, right? Which are the ones that matter because they're visible, they're big and fat and juicy. But if you look at the majority of these little neurons, right, they're just bundles of dendrites. Anyway, I won't go into any more detail on it.
I just realized the same pattern that came up earlier is in how we model this. That Curt would describe what's going on in our brain as a market or economy, and I'm seeing a hierarchy of sovereignty doing exception handling.
Well, I mean, both of those things are true at the same time, right? Is that epistemology is different from decision. And I'm just saying that I'm talking about the epistemology, which is how it's figured out. And you're correct. You're saying that how is it organized for action? It's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's a great pattern. I wouldn't have thought of that.
All right. Do we have time for one more? This next question should be short.
I'm getting tired.
Okay. This won't be long. So question 8. Given the current rate of progress, still waiting for volume 1, I assume it'll take at least 5 to 10 years to publish all 7 volumes of analyzed work. Does this mean we have to wait that long to march on Washington and present our demands to get the process of revolution started?
No. That's a great question. Brad and I started working on volume 2 in exactly this time 1 year ago. We finished volume 2, and we will finish volume 1 in the next month or 2. All right. So it takes, depending on the length of the book, it's taking us 6 to 8 months to produce a book. And we're moving faster. It's amazing how much correction the LLMs provide, and how much it improves the rate at which we produce. So I don't think that at all. I think we can get the 4 volumes that matter done very quickly, because it's not like we're writing them from scratch. Like volume 1 is written from scratch. Volume 2 is written as an outline and fleshed out. That was actually hard. Volume 3 is the logic. It's it's a little over half done, I think. I don't know if we're going to do law first or science first. Science will take a while. Martin and I have already drafted large parts of the law, but it's going to still need some work. We don't know if we're going to write the prosecution or not. I suppose we will. We don't know if we're going to write religion or not. I suppose we will. But the stuff that will say the March on Washington stuff really requires only 4 volumes, 1, 2, 3, and the law. That's all it requires.
It requires organizing the people. You have to have replacements for current power structure.
Yep, exactly.
You can demand what you want from the traitors that are there.
Uh-huh.
Well put. All right. Well, with that, we're done.
Okay, I hope that was okay for the audience. Anything you want to say in closing before I thank everybody?
Like, bell, subscribe.
Okay, so thank you for those who are listening. Please join our Substack. Please join and pay for our Substack if you want to participate. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. Thank you very much.